Is it clear right now?
Yeah,
Or is it still a problem?
it is better now. You can go ahead.
Just a second. Let me just switch to networks.
It is better now. If you want to continue like this, you can.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Please go ahead.
Is it all right now? Or do
Yes,
I
better.
need to change?
No, you're
Right.
good.
Okay. So I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Right. So this is how I'm going to structure my speech. The first part of my speech will be about why this debate is happening in the first place. Second part will be about some general clarifications, and the third part will be about the about the stakeholders and what people do we have to deal with. And the fourth part finally will be about the arguments that stem out of our characterization, right? To start with, why is this debate happening in the first place, especially in context with Abrahamic religions. We think that when you go ahead and pit devil's temptations against human sin as a human agency, we think that it is a battle between superstition versus pragmatic and real life, let's say, agencies, right? Superstition, which is seen as in the form of devil's temptations, as against to this pragmatic thing that we talk about, where sin is seen as a human agency, right? At this point, we need to then define and clarify as to what the human conscience, as well as when you go ahead and tell me, look, sin is a human agency, how does this look like, right? We think that human conscience is something that stays with that particular human for the rest of his life, right? We think that it's a part of his identity, and it's such an integral part of that identity that it becomes a metric for him to judge as well as make decisions in his life, right? When if the conscience tells him that it's not a great thing to do, then there are more likely chances that that person won't go ahead and do that, right? Something that remains, let's say, very proximate to him, as compared to that is devil's temptation. We think that devil's temptation is something that is not as proximate as that is of human conscience. Furthermore, we think that it's a leeway as compared to you going ahead and taking responsibility for the actions that you do, right? Let me give you an example to, let's say, compare it, right? When let's say we have a couple where the wife goes ahead and cheats with her husband, right? We think that at that point, when you have this concept of devil's temptation, that wife goes ahead and tells him that, look, it was because of the devil's temptation that I cheated, and since it's a devil's temptation, the husband might be forgiving, as not as in the case of human consent. But again, this leads to a higher propensity of that wife going ahead and then, let's say, giving into the devil's temptation, as compared to this wife admitting that it's on human conscience, which is again a much more proximate thing, and then he actually improves on, and let's say this sin is then considered as a human agency, right? More on that in the further extensions as well as arguments that we'll talk about. Now let's talk about the characterization that we need to deal with, right? The first part of a characterization will be about the religious leaders. We need to think that religious leaders are the people who are actually at the apex of this whole religious religious pyramid. They are the people who actually want to consolidate power, no matter whatever their interests are. These people are the ones who actually want to be limelight and actually want to have the influence on people's decisions, right? For them to go ahead and do it, we think that these devil's temptations become a very great way. But more about it later. But let's talk about the general public, right? We think that general public, when we talk about an average person, we think that this general public is ignorant, right? Because this general public does not know what's good for him, what's good for him, or what's bad for him, right? It also doesn't know let's say the whole world, right? It doesn't know what is the devil exactly. How does this religious beliefs look like, until and unless these religious leaders go ahead and tell him, right? Tell this general public. Finally we go when we character finally we go ahead and characterize Abrahamic religions. These Abrahamic religions have had a long history, and furthermore, as you can see in today's context, it has let's say a lot of extension towards the whole world, right? Furthermore, it becomes very important to, let's say, think about Abrahamic religions, because these people have the dominant population which exists in the world. Hence, this debate becomes much more relevant. But let's talk about the arguments that we are going to propose to you, right? We think the first argument that we are going to propose to you is about the accountability. We think that when you go ahead and have this concept of devil's temptation as against to the human conscience being as humans, sin becoming a human agency, we think that devil's temptation actually decreases the accountability of that person, simply because this person does not feel anymore that it's on him. It's not on him, but in fact it's on the devil's temptation, because there was a devil that existed in the first place, because this devil went ahead and tempted it with him with let's say whatever pleasures that the devil promised. The person thinks that it was because of the fault of devil that he went ahead and committed a crime or sin or whatever, right? As opposed to that person thinking that maybe it was not because of the devil, but it was according to his own human agency, as well as, let's say, his surrounding is something that he believes in realistically and thinks that it can be improved on pragmatically, as compared to, let's say, combating the devil. Right? But apart from this, we think that in accountability, we also notice that the justice isn't served, right? Because now you have this, let's say, a third offender that exists in a case of a third offender that actually exists between a victim and the person who did crime, right? That is the devil, right? Because now this devil exists. We don't think that there is a lot of victim closure involved now, simply because now you can actually go ahead and dump all the sins, all the, let's say, bad things that actually happens to the victim on actually the devil now, and not consider the person who was actually guilty, who was doing it, right? Something that was actually prevalent in these Abrahamic religions, especially when we talk about how men actually give, especially when these Abrahamic religions actually go ahead and reinforce the patriarchal institutions, which is seen in the way where they talk about how men give into the womanly desires, and something that they consider as devil temptation, which is a very problematic thing to begin with, right? But third part about accountability is, not only does it leads to, let's say, poor human quality as well, poor human quality, as well as it principally downgrades these people, but also it leads to conflicts between religions, right? Let me give you an example. Let's say we have non-Abrahamic religions as well as Abrahamic religions, right? When where a dispute happens, a conflict happens, but now since there's this metric that there was a devil that actually caused it, we think that when these Abrahamic people actually have a different view on how these crimes are committed as opposed to non-Abrahamic people who actually think that there is this human agency, the sin happens simply because of this human agency. Now there's this conflict that happens, and hence there's this polarization that actually occurs between these two groups, simply because they are dumping the crimes on different people. But let's talk about my second argument, which is about the ignorance, right? Understand, as I characterized to you before, that these religious leaders are the people who actually want power, right? These people would do literally anything to go ahead and be in the apex and be in the limelight. What did they go ahead and do, right? They go ahead and capitalize on something that these general public don't even know, things such as devils, right? Because this general public does not know what does this devil look like, how does this devil function. Then who goes ahead and tells them what is this devil? These religious leaders who actually capitalize on their ignorance and actually steal their decision making power, and hence go ahead and lose their authenticity. These people go ahead and lose their authenticity simply because now they gave in to these superstitions regarding these devil's temptations, because apparently in religion only these religious leaders know what does this devil do and how can you actually combat devil, something that gives the power, much more power, to these religious leaders as compared to before, right? Which is a problematic, as my DPM will go ahead and explain to you. I think that will be all. Thank you.
Great. I thank Prime Minister for that fine speech. Leader of Opposition, whenever you're ready.
Just give me like 20 seconds to set up my timer.
I'm so sorry, but your voice is breaking.
I don't know what to do. One second. Is this
It is
better?
better now. It is better now.
All right. Just give me 20 seconds to fix that as well. Tell me if this is better. Is this okay? Am I clearly audible?
Yes, you are good.
All right then. Cool. Hello everyone. Ganesh going as hello. Prefer to not see him. Also, POIs, you can just interrupt me when I'm speaking, but I'll ask for a POI anyway, preferably. Uh, with that being said, I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. I'll do three things in the speech. First, I'm going to give you a proper setup and tell you what we stand for. Secondly, on why morality is better on our side, and thirdly, on why their side is worse for marginalized communities. Firstly, then, let's look at very simple setups. Two things here. Firstly, we feel that what we support on our side is the status quo concept of hell and heaven, and that the devil is trying to like out there to get people fall into the temptations, and that's a morally wrong thing to do in and of itself. Secondly, we feel this debates about the hypothetical world, and this is where opening government feel on their button, right? And they need to tell us what this world would look like, and not just that, and go out and tell us why their world looks like a particular way and why that is beneficial for them. They just told us this world will look like XYZ things, but actually proving to us why, telling us why it's beneficial. And then will be to present you the why the status quo is better as it is given its temptations and therefore prove its benefit. Firstly, then on why morality is better on our side. A crucial piece is what's the problem with status quo? Something that's about Abrahamic religion is that all of them together basic morals which we in status quo agree are righteous, right? Like love thy neighbor, no harm, these concepts, these norms of these religions. However, the norms of these religions which are bigoted, on the other hand, or which we consider offensive in the status quo, is going to remain static on either side of the house. Either so the debate then becomes about which side tries to reduce it, or which side works for this bigotry which it has, and then still gets out the other benefits which we can talk about, right? The reason that's going to remain static is pretty prevalent because, as they said, organized religion of itself is really hard to change, but factions which do change are going to change on itself. Okay, firstly, then how we do this? Three ways. Firstly, on accountability, right? This responds to their idea on accountability as well, because we feel that the consequences are much similar on a to the house, right? But this, why are we better? Three reasons. Firstly, we feel that if we talk about human fallacies, like humans generally make mistakes. I'm sorry.
Hi, your voice is like severely breaking. We cannot hear you. Could the chair confirm the same?
Yeah, really sorry for interrupting, but we couldn't hear
Yeah, we put
anything.
it on the chat box.
Yeah.
Is it better if I switch off my video?
Yeah, that would probably work.
Should I start from the beginning?
If possible, if the chair.
Okay, so it was breaking a bit, but I think it was audible. But yeah, if it's not audible for the teams, it's okay. Let's start from the beginning, because if it was breaking, it was breaking also.
Okay, I'm really sorry about this. Right now, I am perfectly audible and everything's fine, right?
I think it's similarly breaking. Teams, can you confirm? Because it's very similar to what it was before.
Could you say like a long sentence?
Just repeat the motion.
Is it better now?
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. All right. Again, if then let's let me know. I'm really sorry about this.
Sorry, I still can't hear it.
Change my microphone. Is this better? This is better. I've changed my microphone.
Ganesh, this is worse.
This is worse.
I don't think he's speaking, is he?
Yeah, but like we can't hear you. It's very, very.
So I don't know what to do.
Could you just maybe like speak a proper sentence because I can hear you like really fine.
Okay, so hi everyone. I'm Ganesh, known as Hello.
Yeah,
I cannot
yeah.
see him. Is that fine?
Better.
Audible.
All right. Thank you. Sorry about this. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Final 3 things in the speech. Firstly, setup. Secondly, on why there is better morality on our side. Thirdly, on why we're better for marginalized community. Firstly, on setup, then quickly, the burden we are supporting is the status quo, where Abrahamic religions talk about the concept of hell and heaven, where devil is trying out that, trying to get people, and we feel that other things remain stuck. Secondly, we feel that this debate is about a hypothetical world and what it looked like. So their burden was to tell us what this world would look like and why that's the likely world. But we feel that in that case, police already failed on their part. So firstly, on why there's better morality on our side, we feel like what's a problem then in status quo? Something about Abrahamic religion is that basic morals such as love thy neighbor, do no harm is prevalent. That's one side. On the other hand, we feel that the norms of these religions are bigoted or considered offensive.
Okay, Ganesh, I'm so sorry. Ganesh. So this is again very similar to earlier. If teams have an issue in tracking this, then I think you have to at least change the device, change the device once.
I'll try to speak without my headphones on and see if that's better.
Yeah.
Better now, somehow?
Can't hear you.
Can't hear me now. Is this better?
No, your voice is very feeble.
Okay. I'll try joining in from that device, like my phone.
Yeah, try and join from, let's say, your phone or something.
Yeah. Just give me
Can't hear them.
Really sorry about it.
Adhipatya, have you like connected your earpods or something?
No, we couldn't hear them as well.
Yeah.
Aashna. Okay.
I think it's better in terms of like continuity, but it's just not audible. It's very feeble.
Just give me a second. I'm joining from my phone. How do I join up? Okay, cool. All right. I've joined through my phone and see how this works. Am I audible then? Now?
Yes.
Is it better?
Yes, it's better.
Thank you. So should I start from the beginning again?
Yep.
Okay. So in this case, could someone put up a timer if possible? I'm on my phone.
Kalyani, can you put in timestamps? Will timestamps work?
Sure.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay, cool. I'll be starting my speech in 1 second. I'll use this one. Okay, I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Final 3 things in the speech. Firstly, on setup. Secondly, on why we had better morality on our side. And thirdly, why we are better for marginalized communities. Firstly, on setup, then we feel that setup is feasible from our side. We support the status quo where Abrahamic religions talk about the concept of hell and heaven, where the devil is trying to out there to get people for the sins they commit, or as a temptation of devil through which people commit sins, right? Secondly, we feel that this debate was about a hypothetical world, and OG had a burden to tell us what this world looks like and why it pans out in a specific way, and they can't assume that things would work in a specific way. So we feel that therefore they already failed on this world. Then on first argument on why we get morality on our side. What the context here? So the Abrahamic religions in general are all like preach basic morals, which we agree with, like love thy neighbor, do no harm. And on the other hand, these religions, which are in the worst case, like they say, bigoted, we consider offensive. We feel that that's not going to change on either side and it's static, right? This then debate becomes about how A, we reduce it, or B, work with whatever we have, like with this bigoted framework, and why we are still better. Firstly, then on accountability. we feel that this responds to the idea of accountability as well. And because we feel that consequence of sins are pretty much same on either side, right? So three things here then. Firstly, if human, we feel that humans in general, and both sides agree that humans in general make mistakes. Abrahamic religions agree that humans in general make mistakes. So it's far easier to like give into a whole humans make mistake than talking about the devil. Right? So committing sins out of human agency feels a lot negligible on their side. Therefore, we feel that Abrahamic adopting this particular norm would then lead to like more like less more moral actions on our side, right? So, and we feel that these moral actions do matter to a particular section of society and to society at large who do believe in this faith and who do believe in doing certain things the right way. Secondly, we feel that these religious leaders who are actually take advantage of people less on our side, given the fact that when there's this prevalent norm of the devil and the norm of, let's say, human agency, which is pretty ambiguous on our side, right? For someone, for me, what's right from a human agency point of view was whether it was someone's choice or whether someone was forced to do it, or what might be right for me might not be right for another. Given this ambiguity existing in human agency, that's the point at which religious leaders will take far more advantage of people, not when there's a set norm that devil will try to get you if you do X, Y, Z things wrong. Three, we feel that devil is often associated as a dirty entity. Therefore, when religions preach this, they are giving this idea of being associated with the devil or making the active choice to engage with activities associated with the devil as a bad thing, right? They feel that therefore people are often then likely to like it acts as a disincentive to people to like act in a really wrong. Secondly, we feel that fear is a really good and strong mobilizer, and it's the reason why this is really important because this is fear is the way in which religions on either side of the house, even if it's human agency, would mobilize their religion and would attract people belonging to devout, like who are like devoutly Catholic or on either side. Given that fear exists on either side, on our side, why is it better? We feel that the fear, therefore, is not on an institution per se, like church. It's rather on like it also acts as a like on the devil per se. So you can go to a church, confess and take forgiveness on our side, and the priest would probably say, hey, it's because of the devil. Don't worry, we'll try to get you out. On the other hand, when it's human like agency, it's a lot worse then because for the priest, it's now you who did the wrongful act and you have nothing to do. Thirdly, we feel that there are varying degrees of faith which exist on in religion. So some people it does matter. For some people, religion doesn't matter. The most devout, we feel that them thinking there's a devil, that's far it's like far better. The people who are like on the fence of religion, like who pray like at certain point of time, even that's better for on our side, given that the idea of religion then becomes about only particular choice. They can like exercise their urgency in other areas of their life and still like pain lives the bonds. Finally, remember this is not 200 BC, this is 21st century. So religious purpose and meaning has a different purpose and meaning of status quo. Therefore, we feel that the moral framework is what's the most important part of this debate, right? Before moving on, I'd like to take a POI if there's any from closer. Cool. Now, saying none, two important what's the impact of this? Two important things. Firstly, for the religion itself, we feel that we feel that for religions and followers, they're less likely to commit sins and therefore get riled up by religions because religions on either side are going to like be very harmful. Like hardcore religion is going to be really like hard on people who commit sins. We feel that forgiveness, this concept of Abrahamic forgiveness, is far better on our side for followers and for religions themselves. It prevents them from becoming more radical. Why is it worse for marginalized communities then? Firstly, we feel that marginalized communities in the status quo, who are like probably like raised in ghettos for reasons which are out of their agency, things like a vicious cycle of crime and socioeconomic factors like African Americans in the United States, feel that then this leads them out of completely accessing adopting religious faith on their side of the house, and they're far more discriminated against the status quo, right? Because these are things that are completely out of their agency and it will continue to happen in the status quo in the near future. Secondly, we feel that there are two types of problems which are particularly faced, right? In the minority, like in the majority places of worship and minority places of worship. The majority places of worship, like a white church or like a general church, for example, who people or like who are inherently discriminatory against minorities in general, driving the sphere of agency, like driving this norm of agency is far worse, given that this becomes it's a really easy tool for these churches to drive that, hey, you know what, like these people like or homosexuality, right? Like these people chose to be homosexual, therefore that they are committing, they are actually themselves are the ones who are committing the sin. They weren't born this way, God didn't make them this way, they're choosing to be homosexual, so that's one harm. Secondly, in terms of minority churches, like say a black church, for example, or why are we still better in those places of worship? We feel in those places of worship as well. When there's this idea of hate, you falling into temptations of devil, the act of let's say a black person going into the life of drugs in the United States, which is technically not their fault, is far easier for going for forgiveness and far easier for them to access things like rehab and acceptance to their faith, because I feel that especially for prison inmates, faith acts as a great reformer of their moral values and acts the great rehabilitation, which is already seen in the status quo, right? So given this, we feel that things like for marginalized communities, we have a great impact. These are twofold. Firstly, we feel that on their side, when the net harm, when they project a net harm in terms of taunting people for the choices they make just because they are who they are, is inherently harmful for marginalized communities, because that's something they can't work with. Secondly, we feel that they will provide you a net benefit at the point at which devil can be the scapegoat for these things, and marginalized communities get more autonomy per se for themselves. For all these reasons and many more, we are supremely proud to oppose.
I thank Hello for that fine speech. I invite DPN. DPN.
1 minute, please.
People having started here. Opening government. Anybody from opening government are you here?
Right. I just need a minute.
Yeah, okay. Now you're on. Okay.
Wait, sorry. Hi. Just a second. I need to set up my timer. Apologies for the delay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, here's how I'm going to structure my speech. First off, I'll be starting with a couple of rebuttals from side opening opposition. Then I'm going to flesh out the points that were brought to the table by my own PM. Right. So let me flag first the case of side opening opposition for you. Right. What does opening opposition come and tell us? They tell us that people would be far easier to forgive in their paradigm. But realize, panel, that's extremely problematic, right? Because for instance, consider a crime in which consider a very grievous crime, right? For example, a woman is sexually assaulted, right? So the Abrahamic religion would put the onus of the man's crime on the devil and not on the man itself. Why is that problematic? Why? Because this gives the man more leeway, right? When the man goes ahead and sees that his crime can simply be brushed off by people comparing it by people putting it on the devil and saying that he was tempted by the devil and that's why he did this. He realizes that this is something that he can potentially repeat again and does not realizes the amount of harm and the consequences he has caused to the victim. Moreover, the victim gets no closure whatsoever, right? The victim goes ahead and sees that everybody's just brushing off his sins on the devil and nobody is acknowledging that he did something that was very, very harmful for her, something that would have potentially disastrous consequences for her for the rest of her life. In this, you are harming the victim as well as the accuser, because both of them don't get the parameters that they need, right? Secondly, they go ahead and tell us that religious leaders take advantage of people's ambiguity and apparently always condemn them in our paradigm. We realize, panel, that's firstly completely inexclusive, right? Because that's how a prefers motion looks like, right? When you're talking about a prefers motion, this is the paradigm that's been going on since the beginning of time. So from the beginning of time, human agency was being the human agency was being used to sort of blame people for their own sins instead of the devil's temptations themselves, right? But in this, the religious leaders won't necessarily go ahead and condemn them, right? These religious leaders can provide mechanisms in which these people can go ahead and mitigate the consequences of what they've done somewhat. For example, in the case where a PM goes ahead and tells you about the husband who cheats on his wife, the priest can go ahead and suggest the husband certain measures. The priest can give him advice on how he simply doesn't need to how he shouldn't cheat again, and maybe try to make it up to his wife in some way, maybe by showering her with attention or being nicer and kinder to her overall. And even if that doesn't happen, sure, even if the priest goes ahead and condemns him, right, this person can go ahead and look for alternate sources, right? Whenever your priest goes ahead and condemns you, you feel that okay, fine, this person is not being able to help me in my situation, so I should go ahead and look out for other ways that would ultimately help me better my situation. In this paradigm, the person can actively go ahead and try to seek therapy, right? In this, the person will be able to recover from whatever sin he has caused in a much more healthier manner as well, right? So even taking them at their best case, we have mitigated this constructive of this, right? Thirdly, they go ahead and tell us about how marginalized communities would sort of would be able to use devil as the scapegoat now for all the crimes they had committed. Realize, panel, that even if you are marginalized, that does not give you the right to go ahead and commit crimes in the name of the devil's temptations. Even if you are a marginalized person, going ahead and stealing from someone is very, very wrong, right? And that we strictly condemn that on side opening government. And we believe that if their sins are made up of human agency, they would find alternative means in which they could actually accomplish the goals that they want, rather than simply brushing off their crimes on the devil's temptations, right? Also, they go ahead and tell us, about people who are homophobic will now be condemned because it's a sin or something. But again, I don't really get that at all, because realize, panel, when you are gay or lesbian or LGBTQIA+, that's a choice that you actively make, right? That's something that's that's not a choice that you actively make, and it's not a sin at all, right? It's something that's very personal to you. But so again, like I mentioned, when this person is when this person is condemned in his or her community by these priests, this person can just go ahead and try to seek out alternative means which would eventually help them better. So in our paradigm, this person is better off. Now, elaborating on the constructives that my PM laid before you, right? Firstly, we give you a twofold model of how accountability works, right? A, the person takes responsibility and tries to, this person takes responsibility and tries to compensate for the mistake that he has made somehow, something which is completely exclusive to our paradigm, because in their paradigm, the person's sins are brushed under the carpet under the guise of devil's temptations, and the person takes no responsibility whatsoever to make their mistakes or correct the errors that they have made so far, right? Moreover, in our paradigm, when the victim of the crime or the sin sees the person who is actually going ahead and getting justice, this person is getting some sort of consequences from the crime that he has done, the victim too feels morally justified. Moreover, this sets a narrative for society in general that these crimes are not wrong, and in the end, if you commit a crime or a sin, it's your own personal responsibility, and you can't just slide stuff under the carpet of devil's temptations and get away with it, right? Moreover, we tell you how in our paradigm, religious leaders are much more manipulative, right? So realize, panel, how a typical religion looks like, right? People are gullible, right? People have this inherent fear of this unknown, right? That they want that is very, very easy for these religious leaders to capitalize on, right? Suppose I cheated on my husband, right? Like my PM mentioned. So in that, now I'm at a complete loss. Like I've committed a sin, right? So I can go to this religious leader and I can tell him that, I have done so and so. And this religious leader will be able to manipulate me very well, because now I am in a vulnerable position and going to that person. They can come up to me and tell me, oh, you did all this, right? This is, you've given into the devil's temptations, and, you need to make up for it by doing whatnot, right? And in this, the religious leader can potentially cause, very harmful actions to occur. How? Because if I go up to him and says that you have done so and so, you need to do something which is probably against some other religion, or something that has direct incentives for the religious leader and religion at large, but may harm the individual, right? In this, the religious leader is able to effectively manipulate this person in their most vulnerable state, using the fear of the unknown that they have. Realize it's a very problematic situation to be such a person and eventually go to a religious leader. They won't necessarily be able to provide you the correct sort of support here, right? And in this, we go ahead and tell you that therapies are something something that has the propensity of occurring in our paradigm is something that sets us apart. Moreover, these religious leaders can effectively go ahead and polarize groups, right? Like our IPM mentioned, they can when a person from a non-Abrahamic religion sees that a person from an Abrahamic religion's sins are brushed under the carpet, right? Their religious leaders might use this to sway people, right? They can go ahead and say, that, oh, in Abrahamic religions, this is what happens, right? People's sins are simply brushed under the carpet. This is how all Abrahamic religions work. This is why you should not associate with people from Abrahamic religions, because if you associate with people, they will just, commit a crime in you and completely get away with it without facing any consequences at all. So this is something that also leads to religious polarization amongst the society at large. So given a two-fold model of accountability and how religious leaders work, as well as rebutting the OO's entire case, I think we take this to be very, very proud of course.
Thank you for that fine speech, TLO.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you are. Please go ahead.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Gaurangi. Preferred pronoun she, her. I will take POIs in the chat box anytime within the permitted time limit. Kindly do not unmute unless acknowledged. I will take a POI from CG preferably. If not, then OG. Panel, give me 10 seconds. I'll count you down. All right, I am ready to start in 3, 2, 1, and now. Panel, my speech will first tell you what being a believer of an Abrahamic religion looks like in the 21st century. Contrary to government's characterization, this is not the Dark Ages in 200 BCE where you have no access to any other resources, right? Secondly, I will tell you what the two major clashes in this debate are. Number one, accountability, and number two, what human conscience looks like, right? So first, let's talk about what is the role of religion and faith in personal identity, right? And we think that when in the 21st century, across all Abrahamic religions through Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, to a certain degree, individuals, regardless of how indoctrinated, regardless of how devout they are as followers, they do co-opt into believing that this exists, since this is no longer the 200 BCE where you need religion to tell you why the sun rises and the sun sets, right? You have the internet, science exists, the criminal justice system exists to, better explain culpability. I will get into this for rebuttal on the government's arguments, but still, right? So we think that now there is far more enhanced society, and religion is something far more tied to personal identity and spiritual belief and faith than government gives it credit for, right? So then what is the consequence of this role of the religion? We think that human beings, when they are now devout believers of a religion, in this case, a Abrahamic faith, they rely on scriptures and the church to form and comprehend a moral framework. I understand that if I committed a certain crime, or in this case, a certain sin, I did it. But the moral and like the meta ethical consideration behind why that happened is something that individuals need the religion to go to reconcile to, right? So you have this in non-Abrahamic religions, such as in Hinduism, where you have the concept of karma, right? On the other hand, in Abrahamic religions, you have the concept of heaven and hell, and all followers, to whatever degree of their devoutness of faith, they do believe that there is now some positive and some negative value of their actions, and their actions on earth will then determine whether they go to in heaven or hell. They also believe in the supreme God-like entity, who is God in this case, which is all goodness, and antithetical to God is, the evil incarnate, which in this case is Satan, right? So when we know that there's a certain degree of choice and there's a certain degree of reliance on religion, not to better explain to you why some person was killed or why something was stolen, but better to find purpose and meaning, and just how innately and inherently tied religion is, and religious explanations of actions is, to personal identity in finding purpose and meaning, we think that you need religion to reconcile actions happening beyond just who actually, put the dagger into someone when a crime was committed, right? For that metaphysical understanding, we think it is not improbable for Abrahamic religions to bring the result, to paint the result as the devil's temptation. And here is a major flaw of opening government in their entire two speeches, which makes them lose the debate, which is the status quo is opposition's paradigm, right? Like everything that we've seen today over like the 2 millennia of Abrahamic faiths telling you that it is devil's temptation that causes sins, none of the impacts that our government has given to you have manifested, right? Have you seen some kind of polarization and conflict between religions? Because Hinduism will not tell you that, devil's temptation exists, whereas Christianity does. That does not exist. You get extremely exaggerated impacts on government, which have not been based in the status quo, which is what the opposition's paradigm is, right? And here is the most important key on accountability and human conscience, right? Insofar as it is said, and insofar as it is a voluntary co-opting into a religious faith, a voluntary co-opting into using religion, in this case Abrahamic faiths, to reconcile why things happen and the morality of those things, we think that human beings understand that there is a certain accountability, right? And here Ganesh tells you that being tainted by the devil holds far more deterrence than human fallacy. We know that across all Abrahamic religions, I'll take POI in a bit, across all Abrahamic religions, forgiveness is key. No matter what crime you commit, no matter the degree of the graveness of the sin that you commit, all Abrahamic religions will tell you that if you love God enough, if you are penitent enough, if you repent enough, you shall be forgiven. All Abrahamic religions also tell you that human fallacy is the root of all existence, right? Like across Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, you will have all scriptures, churches, preachers, sermons, all telling you that human fallacy is innate. Insofar as Abrahamic religions now take up this human fallacy, which has been pretty much the subset of their entire framework, and said that and insofar as forgiveness is something that is pretty fairly granted and it is never something that is irredeemable or irrecoverable, we think that being tainted by the devil or devil's temptation is a far higher deterrent than human fallacy, right? And Ganesh tells you this in extensive detail, which we get absolutely no recognition or rebuttal from opening government from. What does government tell you? That there is no accountability, no human conscience in painting it off and scapegoating the devil's temptation. On the other hand, we tell you that with the very setup of what Abrahamic religions look like, where forgiveness is always an option, with the right amount of penitence, with the right amount of faith, you will always be forgiven for no matter what crime you commit. And insofar as human fallacy is inherent in every acceptance of Abrahamic faith, we think that just saying human agency caused a mistake is not a grave enough deterrent to a sin as compared to devil's temptation. On this, a POI from closing.
Yeah, so if I kill a person, I shouldn't feel guilty, and society owes me a forgiveness because devil made me do it.
Right. Here is also a clarification and characterization that we give to you, right? Again, panel, the status quo is the opposition's paradigm, right? Is it the case that millions, if not billions of people across Abrahamic faiths have no sense of accountability? They don't have criminal justice systems across the Middle East where Abrahamic faith is literally recognized and equivalent to the state? Of course. Here the sin is not that the devil made you do it, but in giving into the temptation, right? And we tell you that that is a far bigger sin, since the consequence and aftermath of that sin, insofar as existence of the same sin and forgiveness is the same on both sides, it's symmetric. We think that the cause of that sin being tainted by the devil, which is antithetical to the God that you worship, is a far bigger deterrent than human fallacy. And here withstanding temptation is key. All sins are a consequence of giving into that temptation, and your irredeemable act of which is supposed to deter human action is that you gave into that temptation, right? And in 21st century, we think this is all the more relevant today, contrary to government's characterization, which is based in the dark ages. We think that in the 21st century today, in the day of social media and all of those things, withstanding temptation is a far bigger metric of human conscience, when we already characterized to you that accountability exists. Now, specific to the example that you get from government about a case of trigger warning, sexual assault, or any case of a crime like that, panel, therapy exists, criminal justice system exists. In all endeavors of human life, they will be brought to justice, right? They will be put behind bars or serve the death penalty. We don't think that suddenly there's some kind of impunity that they get, right? Since we're existing in the metaphysical framework that comes in when religion is so closely tied to personal identity, we think that sin is better deterred when it is devil's temptation, which is what you see the premise of status quo and society being built on, than attributing it to human agency, because we realize that human fallacy has been very easily accepted and pretty much forgiven in Abrahamic faith, and therefore is not as deterrent as it is on our side of the paradigm. For all these reasons and many more, very proud to oppose.
I thank Yellow for that fine speech. That brings us to the close of the top half. To open the back half, member government.
All right. Confirming that I'm audible as well as visible perfectly.
Yep.
All right. Cool. I'll take POIs exclusively in the chat. Please don't unmute yourselves. find it interrupting. I'll preferably take one from opening up. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. There are two assumptions on which OO is running. Number one, that the concept of hell and heaven is at best going to be inexclusive on both sides. But two, human fallacy of individuals deserves some sort of like redemption at the end of the day. Number one, we think that sure on both sides of the house, hell and heaven being like inexclusive still is there. But the only idea that then it has to becomes important is that you do not have a Satan, a devil on our side of the house to be scapegoated into believing that listen, all the actions that I committed or everything that I thought of is literally a byproduct of whatever the Satan told me, and not essentially say like what I actively opted into doing to begin with. The second thing, in terms of human fallacy deserving the aspect of redemption, is something that they never justify at any point in time, right? Because their only idea is that, oh, religion is something that is meant for people and that is why it should be there. But I'm incredibly unsure as to say like, oh, at a point in time, you're actively causing and inflicting harm of other individuals, why maybe the redemption of one person is probably to a certain extent prioritized over the harm that you are inflicting on other individuals in the same religion that you live in. These are the two responses that takes the entirety of opening up out, but I'm going to integrate further things in my speech. Number one, in terms of framing as to how we go ahead and see devil and how it is largely perceived within status quo. Number one, we think the devil is picturized as say like an overpowerful source of external influence, just like the divine creature having access to your knowing, who probably goes ahead and preys on quote unquote weak individuals. So you might do action under the devil's spell. It is not just about proximity as OG suggests, but the intensity with which it's characterized, which you exclusively get from CG, because oftentimes it turns out to be the case that your decision making to a certain extent, even if you're going ahead and doing it on yourself, but rather it's constantly to a certain extent shrugged over the idea of the like, oh, that Satan and devil, like to a certain extent, like influence me. Why actions of people are better on our side of the house, becoming the first exception. Number one, in terms of better accountability. And this is why I'm going to mech out whatever OG says. Because OG just says it's better, but never proves what is the impact of it. Number one, because now it's not just that you can't simply evade saying, oh, a devil was sitting on my shoulder and blabbering stuff into my mind and forced me to do A, B, C things. But two, there is an active fear of alienation that is created, which is particularly good because now if one person is considered to be sinful, they have to face the blunt and can't make the society forget of the actions under the veil that I was tempted by the devil to begin with. But third, the testimony looks like that you can't be relieved by seeking forgiveness from the priest under the name of the Satan or being able to go ahead and label it to the aspect that, okay, a devil perpetuated to a certain extent. The impact of that is two things. Number one, it holds action of people up and not lets them fade in the vision of the society by just simply saying that, oh, you were like, to a certain extent prompted by the devil. But two, there is also an incentive to punish human fallacy of opening opposition beyond say, like this criminal justice system that essentially exists at all points in time on both sides of the house. The idea simply is that religion is meant for everyone. And that is why it necessarily becomes important that opening oppositions and closing oppositions world, you end up going ahead and giving solace to only few individuals who can probably go ahead and seek forgiveness by saying that I was prompted by the Satan. I didn't do like knowingly or intentionally, but rather the individual who has necessarily gone ahead and faced the blunt of all that harms necessarily still goes ahead and faces all the problems to begin with. We think at that point in time, this person is seen to be like unholy and irremediable. And that is why we think this blame game is entirely problematic, right? The entire case of opposition bench is antithetical to minorities and dehumanizes their lived experiences and gaslights them into believing that they were the victim of the Satan, they were the victim of the devil, and not this person when their perpetrator continues to loom around as someone who has been forgiven by the priest. Note this not only flips the entirety of OO in terms of proving why marginalized are much worse on their side, but rather pushes burden on CO to justify why not having this particular accountability is rather good to begin with. The second extension then, why religion is better on our side of the house. Number one, we think the aspect of you perpetuating this idea of human agency necessarily means that the religion is largely being evolved on our side of the house. Note now the teaching and scriptures of religion are changed to understanding that every individual is a byproduct of their choices and a byproduct of the actions that they go ahead and make. We think this is crucial because now people necessarily go ahead and engage in better actions on our side of the house. What necessarily does? on scale, there is a larger incentives of doing good just simply increases, right? Because now bad actions are not just seen to be sinful, but also invites cost that you might not be forgiven, which deterrs them to perpetuate wrong actions to begin with. Because now you do not have an easy leeway in, but also in order to not be sinful and instead get salvation, you probably are able to go ahead and engage in good work propagated by religion, like say doing charity, good work for others, and things like that. Because now you just simply think that, listen, I being a byproduct of my choices ultimately means that I actually have to go ahead and make choices that are good in nature or something that the religion tells me to be good to begin with. That ultimately means that not only we go ahead and increase the impact on scale in terms of going ahead and benefiting the most number of stakeholders, but number two, this automatically means that the most vulnerable stakeholders are benefited on our side of the house, because not only means this ultimately means we probably have more charity and so like more donations coming in, but that automatically means to a certain extent the actions of people are seen to be a byproduct of them and not necessarily going ahead and relating them to say like one ordinary actor or like a non-existing actor like a Satan to begin with. Before I tell you why society is better on our side of the house, I want to take OO.
When we tell you that things like homosexuality is
I'm really
something which
sorry,
is
I can't
religions
understand
inherent.
because your voice is breaking for me. I Number even majority of populace ends up following Abrahamic religion. That is something that has been agreed on our side of the house. Note that you are being taught that you're a product of your choices ultimately means there is a feeling to understand why you did something. Notice this ultimately means that the society necessarily presumes that there is an agency, and that is why there is rationality associated with the kind of actions that you go ahead and commit. This is better because of a couple of reasons. Number one, we think morality and moral compass of people now improves because now there is no belief to be influenced by non-existing sources, but actual evidence of the choices and the actions that you go ahead and make. Even if there is, say, like a devil or a Satan existing, now the religion goes ahead and teaches you that, listen, you should not be a victim or you should not be a weak individual to fall a prey to all the devil's temptations or satanic verses, but rather you should know that, listen, every choice and every action is something that you have to repay for and you will be held accountable for to begin with. We think this ultimately means that the morality and moral compass of individuals becomes better. Secondly, there are more incentives now to actually educate people because now they think that their actions are bad because of choices or probably not because of having knowledge. This means that trying to educate people or rehabbing more people is rather better on our side. But third, it largely looks like people having more control over themselves because this would look like that they are worthy of God when your actions are correct. We think at this point in time, there's more control to individuals, more vulnerable stakeholders being benefited, but not necessarily going ahead and just like giving or just like shirking off your burden.
Great. I thank member government for that fine speech. Member off whenever you're ready.
Hi, can you give me like 20 seconds?
Sure.
Hi, can I confirm that I'm clearly visible and audible?
Yep.
All right, I will take POIs in the chat box. And, oh, sorry, timer. 1 sec, let me set up a timer, sorry. Okay, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, government bench is out. This is because of the fact that the government bench across both benches of government make this false assumption that assuming that sin as a result of giving into devil's temptation is the be all and end all of all of religion, right? This is objectively and factually incorrect. We tell you religion doesn't stop there. We tell you the very purpose of Abrahamic religion is to go a step further and to help people to overcome temptation, to teach people how to go beyond the devil's temptation, to teach people people how to resist temptation, to teach people to rise above. That being said, we on side closing opposition are going to win this debate with 4 unique extensions, right? First, on our side of the house exclusively panel, religion assumes that individuals are inherently good. Why is this necessarily true? And why is this so important for religion to assume this, right? Reason why this is necessarily true is because religion makes it such. Abrahamic religion, by principle, indoctrinates people into believing that they need to act good, that they need to be good, and that to be good is the very purpose of their life, right? On that purpose, to the effect that Abrahamic religion is successful, we know that people want to be good. Because people want to be good, we think it's this fallacious argument to say that all sin is a result of individuals' agency by virtue of the fact that religion is preaching the very antithetical of that. That is, there are external forces which are bad. We as individuals, as followers, as believers, need to rise above it. Some essential characterization about in Abrahamic religion in the first place that no other team has given you. Understand the reason we're talking in specific about Abrahamic religion is because Abrahamic religions in particular talk about and believe in a universe made up of super empirical binaries, right? What does this look like? There is either good or bad, heaven or hell, sin or virtue. We tell you that when religion indoctrinates individuals to buy into virtue over sin, we tell you that religion has an inherent incentive to believe that individuals are going to follow this by virtue of the fact that religion in and of itself is inculcating in these individuals the individual incentive to be good rather than bad. That being said, why is everyone worse off on our side of the house? Primarily individuals on one hand and religion on the other. Understand that individuals on our side want to be good because they want to resist the temptation of the devil, because that's what religion and their entire society and culture teaches them is the right thing to do. We don't think it's because they fear the devil. We think it's because they want to do right by themselves, by their religions, and by God. We tell you then that when people want to be good but they end up doing bad things, and we tell you that this is inevitable because it is inevitable for all humans to sin. We don't think it is possible for the government to give us the example of a single human being who has lived their entire lives without sin despite wanting to do so. We tell you that this results in an immense sense of cognitive dissonance. What does this look like? In a world where you want to do good and you're told that this is how you do good, this is how you overcome the devil, and you really want to do it, that's when you know that you can do better. That's when you have the ability to get better. However, when you're told that you being bad is a result of your own agency, it results in cognitive dissonance because you don't understand what's going wrong or what's happening or why you're sinning despite not wanting to do so. It results in this innate sense of hopelessness. I'll engage with you later. This innate sense of hopelessness which results in you not knowing what's going wrong, what's wrong with you or what's wrong with your religion, which leads to further hopelessness in terms of individuals giving up on their religion in the first place because they think their religion has failed them, because they think they're inherently bad people. And when you think you're an inherently bad person, you don't think you deserve God. This is when you turn against God. This is when you turn against subscription. This is when religion loses its subscription. This is when religion loses its followers, right? That being said, in terms of our third extension, let's shift the timeline of this debate a little bit, right? Very important. We exclusively on side closing opposition do this for you. We tell you not just about today. We tell you about how we're not just talking about the 21st century. We're talking about how the motion specifically says in which Abrahamic religions preached the narrative that sins, blah, 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 blah. We tell you when the motion talks about preached, we need to consider a historical context. We need to consider a world in which this narrative has been preached since time immemorial. We need to consider what religion would look like then. And understand, panel, that in a world where religions historically had preached, as the motion said, that the narrative that sins are a result of human agency, this is exactly what would happen, right? Cognitive dissonance, hopelessness, loss of faith, loss of belief that your religion is going to help you, loss of faith in yourself, that you can do better, despite wanting to not sin. We tell you that this is where all of these things break down. This is where we think that religion itself today would look very, very different because of the fact that through history, people would gradually and consistently lose their faith in religion because religion wouldn't be able to help them to not sin in a world where they believe that they were inherently bad people. However, the fact of overcoming the devil is a present and continuous fact, something that people continually work on overcoming and make small progressive steps towards on a rolling basis, which is why we think that that is what makes religion relevant today. before I go on POI from Narayan. Hit me.
All right. On both sides of the house, that religion is not going to teach you to be bad, right? But the idea simply is that on your side of the house, religion still has one fallacy that, listen, if you do bad, you can point it to the devil and not essentially like on you and hold
This is where
accountability.
you make this really wrong assumption about it. You assume that religion says that, okay, you've done something bad, it's the devil's fault, now fuck it all. We tell you that's not what's happening. We tell you the very purpose of this religion is to teach you how to do better. To give in to the devil is also something you confess, is also something you repent for, is also something you overcome. We don't tell you that that's the be all and end all of religion. Succumbing to the devil is also bad according to religion. It's also something you have to repent for. And this is exactly what brings me to my fourth and final constructive, that of forgiveness. We tell you that it is exactly on our side of the house that religion becomes a much safer space, a much more welcoming space, a space which teaches you rather than shuns you. We tell you that it is on our side that you have religion as a place of comfort versus one of guilt. We tell you that when you have religion telling you that it's okay, there's an external force that has made you sin, however you can overcome this, you can do better, you can repent and seek forgiveness. We tell you this is where you feel forgiven and therefore feel more incentivized to want to do better, because you don't feel the sense of hopelessness where you think that, oh, oops, it's too late, I'm pretty much fucked now because I'm a bad person, and so I'm just going to give up and there's no forgiveness or heaven for me. We tell you this is where religion at large is better off, not just today but over the course of history. We tell you this is where individuals are better off in terms of their subscription to religion on the macro level, and in terms of their own sense of self-worth on the micro level, in terms of how they feel about themselves, in terms of not being innately bad people. We tell you this is where on a whole the world is better off. We're very proud to oppose.
I thank member off for that fine speech. Kavya.
Okay, just to check, am I audible?
Yep, please go ahead.
All right. I'm not seeing the chat, but opening, please be ready. Perhaps DLO can give me a POI because of the connection issues. We'll take you after
your POI preference. Do you want to be interrupted?
No. I will call for a POI after 5 when I'm ready.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. It's funny how the opposition side, after Elo's speech, which was basically, okay, we didn't have as much of the accountability and we didn't need to have forgiveness for those people because they were tempted, took a turn and actively tried to advocate for agency and for you to be able to resist the devil because you have that power inside of you. And I think that essentially is a problem with opposition bench, because they are unable to prove that this is something that normal individual with the depictions of the devil that you essentially have, which is a probability that you will have on their side of the house, is likely to be capable of doing. Meaning that when Narayan specifically gives you characterization of devil being supernatural being that preys over you and generally goes for weaker people, and you falling for the temptation is something that makes you being perceived as weak by the rest of the community, is something that essentially, gaslights you into the idea whether you have agency over that or you don't have the agency. Comparatively speaking, when you have agency on our side of the house without the devil's supernatural being, meaning this means that you have equal choice of making certain decisions, meaning that you have, if you made a bad thing, you have a choice to easily as you did the bad thing to do the good things. But also you have a lot of guilt trip, which I think generally is a good thing when people are doing shitty things. Okay, now let's deal with the OO specifically. They presume that person can keep away from the sins. I'm not sure whether they've seen Abraham religion, holy books and all of those kinds of things, but literally wearing two different pieces of fabric is a sin. Me swearing in my mind when I cannot remember how to say a word in English because I'm EFL is considered a sin. Meaning that normal individual cannot probably live their day without making some kind of sin. Meaning that if it's the insinuation of you making some kind of sin is that you're weak, and devil is actively taking over you and the temptation is working, this makes people less into the belief that they actively have control over their lives, but rather that some other being is being able to control them. Meaning that the probability of you doing good things and to be completely on the clean side, which is something that is a prerequisite for opening opposition to work, is not something that is happening. Note that by their mechanism, it's enough for you to slip once into the scene to feel like you're powerless, given that the depiction of devil is, as Narayan explained. Also note that I'm not sure why removing the guilt is something that is a good thing. Note that not all of the crimes are prosecuted. The idea of supernatural beings, God and devil itself, is connected to the fact that they're constantly with you, meaning that you feeling guilty for doing something, even if you are not caught, is something that makes that punishment for you that you essentially deserve because you did a bad thing to the other person. This is not only affecting the crimes. Not that criminal justice system is only for the crimes. You can be a shitty person on your daily life and actively hurt people, break hearts, cheat on your girlfriend, and those kinds of things which are horrible. And for you to not be able to feel guilty because devil took over you is not something that we feel is justified. Simply in the terms of the metrics of a justice system, if someone deserves a punishment, which kind of concedes when they say, we will have criminal justice system on our side of the house, probably we're better off. Also note what we're doing specifically here. They do not have the answer. They have completely wrong characterization on how other people interact with you. Meaning that if you're perceived as a weak, given that you are doing all of these sins, etc., the devil has taken over you, etc., you are not. You essentially are perceived as if you don't have enough of the belief for the God. You are not worthy of the God, and therefore you're not worthy of getting the help of these people, of generally engaging with you, which makes it more likely for you to be alienated. I think every single team inside of this debate agrees that religion perhaps is something that is good because it makes you do good things. At the point at which religion rejects you because devil is inside of you, this is something that then brings enormous harms on these particular people. I think this is how we probably win over OO. Now let's deal with the CEO. They also run to that belief that you can overcome temptation and actively decide to unite their opening with the answer to POI, how you essentially have the agency, how you essentially have all of these benefits, etc. The problem with whether people need to be good, etc., I completely agree that on both of the sides, probably religion tells you to be good because this is how it's constructed to have that kind of morality part. But the problem is this doesn't engage with our mechanism. Do other people want to help you and engage with you and want to understand perhaps why you practice your agency the way you did? In the sense of actively trying to, take you as a part of their community. Note that this is really important because if you have perception of the devil is inherent evil, note that people being able to make actions means there's a space for change. So the comparative is if someone believes the devil is close to you because you're weak, at that point they will not engage with you rather than you actively being able to practice your agency better in the future. Before I go on, I would like to take OO. Okay, Sio? Okay, I guess
guilt is removed through a comprehensive process of repentance, which is followed by forgiveness. Do you think religions shouldn't indulge in forgiveness at all?
LO states that guilt is problematic and you should cope and you should not blame yourself for the things you did. We believe this is something that is crucial at the point of which you don't have other kinds of punishment. And I'm not sure guilt is completely removed when you have supernatural actor being 100 times stronger than you, taking over your mind and doing certain things. Because note what is the depiction of devil. Devil is not your friend who tells you to do shit. It's supernatural being which knows your weaknesses and everything. Comparing to the opening government, I think characterization regarding the devil is logically prior to the impacts they're trying to achieve. Given that you have that perception of devil being as strong and this being so coercive in that particular point, the ideas of you making, the ideas of you being more likely to make bad things, etc., and being less likely to get to the right path and we adding additional mechanization on how people actively engage with you is something that is necessary for their case to work. I also think in the terms of the extension of impacting, you actively removing people from religion because you believe that they're too weak, they're not worthy of God, etc., is a huge impact extension that we had on them. I think we clearly win.
I thank Kavya for that fine speech. Op 5th.
Hi, just give me about like 15 seconds. Great. I'll be taking a POI on the chat box. I will prefer a POI from opening over closing for diagonal engagement. That being said, I will begin in 3, 2, 1. The problem with opening government is that to a large extent, they assume that the be all and end all of religion is just telling you that something that you did is because of devil's temptation, and they literally just end there, right? The problem with opening opposition is firstly an inherent contradiction of whether or not there's going to be like lesser sins or not. But more importantly, most things that O tells you is just left with a bunch of assertions not really analyzed or like fleshed out properly at all. The problem with closing government then is they don't really mechanize what this idea of taking accountability looks like, right? They come here and simply just blatantly assume that somehow people are just going to take up responsibilities and are going to be punished whatsoever. I do not know what this world is going to look like. Here's what I'm going to do to you in my speech today. I'm going to first talk to you about the 4 exclusive extensions that we give to you and tell you why these are a lot more important than what OVO tells you. Secondly, I use exclusively our extensions to take down both opening government and closing government and tell you why we win this debate, even in our absolute worst case scenario. But before that, 2 important things that you need to note before judging this debate, right? Firstly, understand that on both sides of the house, commission of sins is absolutely symmetric, right? People are going to commit sins regardless. But secondly, and most importantly, this debate is about 2 things, right? Firstly, this debate is about how religion makes individuals feel. And secondly, and most importantly, this debate is about how this debate largely revolves around people who actually believe in religion, who actually believe in the fear of God. And eventually, I'll tell you why this is a lot more important. What do we give to you exclusively on side closing opposition? And why are each of them a lot more important in this debate, right? What you get from opening up is like 3 vague ideas about firstly there being like deterrence on their side of the house without like much analysis as to why that's necessarily true. Secondly, they talk to you about this impact on marginalized communities, and thirdly, this idea about how sins are suddenly going to be reduced or whatsoever. First of all, we do not agree with the third idea. Note that sins are going to be symmetric on both sides of the house. I'm going to like flesh this out better, right? What do we give to you exclusively on C or why this is important? Firstly, note that insofar as you're debating a motion about this house prefers the world, this idea of how it goes ahead and like impacts people is like extremely important, right? Particularly when it's a religion-based motion. Firstly, we talked to you about the creation of cognitive dissonance. Insofar as you're actively telling that people are inherently good and people are like supposed to be good, insofar as this is like necessarily true, at a point where you commit a crime and you're told that you committed a crime because you are a fucked up person, we think this cognitive dissonance exists and you do not really know what to do with that, something that religions are not supposed to do. Secondly, we talked to you about how religion is supposed to be a safe space, right? Beyond any hard impacts or whatever, religion is supposed to be a safe space for you before anything. But thirdly, and more importantly, we've talked to you about how it's important to assume that people are inherently good and why what you end up doing is probably a product of your circumstances more than your choices. But fourth and most importantly, we talk to you about how people on our world do not just end with jerking off their responsibilities by calling it the devil's temptation. They actually go beyond that, and religion helps you go beyond that. Why are these things a lot more important than what OG and CG tells you? 3 things you get from opening government, right? Firstly, proximity. 2, accountability. 3, the idea that forgiveness in and of itself is bad. Proximity. Note that I don't see why your agency is a lot more proximate to you than the fact that you gave into a devil's temptation. Not necessarily true, right? Note what our world is going to look like. You're actually going to be made to think about why you gave into a certain temptation, which means why you committed committed, let's say, theft, for instance, as to what made you do it and how exactly you went ahead with this. This means this idea of proximity is symmetric to a large extent. I don't think they win this at all. Right? So secondly, what I talk to you is this idea of accountability. I'm really not sure how this accountability is mechanized either on OG or on CG. Right? They simply tell you that individuals take accountability for their actions, except that at no given point in time do they even make an attempt to connect this to Abrahamic religions at all, right? CG doesn't even attempt to do this. Notice that the way Abrahamic religions function is teaching you the idea of like forgiveness after you like repent for your sins and all of that, right? This means even on our side of the house, accountability exists, except the way this plays out is when you're a lot more kinder to people who've committed these sins, where you tell them, okay, you gave into this because of a product of your circumstances, and we like work through this or whatever stuff, right? But thirdly, and most importantly, they tell you that forgiveness in and of itself is bad. This is extremely problematic for Abrahamic religions, right? Look what a world where like 100 years of like religion taught you that forgiveness is bad. If someone like committed a sin, you should just shun them off or whatever. People don't have any incentive to do good at all, right? Insofar as you're a religion who has to create some sort of a safe space to people, the only incentive for you to be better is when your religion is actually welcoming, despite the fact that you've committed a crime, despite the fact that you fucked up, right? What do we get from side closing government before I say that POI quickly? CG.
Okay, so if you agree that religion should be a safe space for everyone, why there should be a selective application that safe space is created for someone who has perpetuated the crime by taking salvation and forgiveness from the priest, but not essentially for the victim?
This is exactly where we tell you that the idea of religions believing that individuals are inherently good is important, right? And I fleshed it out eventually. Firstly, what you get from closing government is three things. Firstly, they tell you that people now have a fear of alienation, therefore they're going to be good. Look, fear of alienation literally never worked, not in religion, not in criminal justice system. This means the only way individuals have an incentive to be like reformed and do better is when you have a welcoming society. What does this mean? This means if your religion is actively telling you, this also responds to that POI, right? If your religion is telling you, oh, guess what? You've committed something bad, you've done a sin. This means that you sort of like you exercise your own agency to do this. You're a bad person and this religion is only for good people. You get out and you're like alienated. I do not know what is my incentive to be a good person after this because this religion never really welcomed me. I'm not really going to subscribe to this whatsoever, except on our side of the house at a point where you're told that, you know what, this is not entirely your individual mistake. This is something that you gave into because devil's temptations is something that happens to every single one of us and we all sin, and sort of like explain to you how to work through this and get better. When you have a welcoming society after you've committed a sin, that's when you have an incentive to do better and become a better person, something that is extremely important for religions fundamentally, right? But secondly, they tell you rationality is assumed on their side of the house when you commit an action and people understand you better. Rationality is symmetric on our side also as well, right? This means when you give in to a devil's temptation, you're probably rationalizing what made you do it, what made you do something that's fundamentally bad within the society, except the way you're going to be repenting for these sins, the way you're going to be viewed is someone who has done something bad beyond their own agency, which means that you're given a better chance to become better, something that's very, very crucial for religion. Thirdly, they talk to you about how someone has to be punished. I do not know how exactly this punishment is firstly going to work on their side of the house. I'm not sure why religion, specifically Abrahamic religions, specifically have to do this. But more importantly, when you sort of like punish them and treat them, like alienate them and like make them bad and all of that, all of those things. If 100 years of religion actually did this, know that given that we talked to you about how every single person sins, I'm really not sure how religion would have played out. This means that you probably just alienate one person after the other and talk to them about how God does not like them because, hey, they committed a sin and like they exercise their own agency and like Christianity is only for good people, so you fuck off, right? This means that you're creating the way religion would have formed itself, given that this is the motion not only about the 21st century but also the past, would have been like inherently exclusionary and driven people to start fundamentally be bad because you no longer have a welcoming space. Even in our absolute worst case scenario panel, even if people are like somehow shirking off the responsibilities for committing a crime, insofar as we do want to reform people, we do not think reformation happens in a world where you're like alienating people, where you do not give them a chance, where you like you do not understand the people but committed a crime out of like inevitable circumstances. Very proud to.
Great. I thank Opweb for that fine speech. I thank all speakers for an engaging debate. Step out of the room. We will have deliberation and call you back for OA. Thank you. I would prefer if OA and deliberation isn't strict. Teams, please leave the room. Gaurangi, can you please leave the room? Oh, see, we can stop the stream. Have you stopped the stream? Yeah. I'm not starting yet. I was requesting you to put them back in the main room if you can. Thank you. Also, Kalyani, we can take this time to come to our initial calls.
Okay, sounds good. Do you have your ranking ready yet? Because I was just working on that.
Yeah. Let's just work on that. Till that time, I think the person who's there in the room will be sent out, and then we can discuss.
Okay, sounds good.
Great, thank you. Okay, Kalyani, do you have an initial call?
Yeah, 1 second. Okay, so my ranking is OO, OG, CO, and CG.
So CG takes support for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
What about you?
Yeah, it's very different. For me, it's CG, CO, OG, O.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay,
Wait.
let's just sort this out.
All right. Wait, could you repeat that? CG?
CO, OG, OO.
GO. Okay, wow. That's kind of the exact opposite.
Okay, I think there will be some confusion. Either one of us.
Right.
And get sorted. Where to start now? Okay, can you tell me your ranking once again? And let's see if we have any opinions.
Yeah, so my ranking is OO, OG, CO, and CG.
Let's just start by discussing the top half because I think that's the least.
Okay.
That I'm least married to. So yeah.
All right, sounds good. So I would say it was a very close call between OO and OG. And I don't necessarily mean that in a good way. So the only reason I gave it to OO over OG is because the DLO speaker, I think, definitely carried the team to the top. I didn't really like the leader of opposition's speech very much. I mean, the points I feel like did have potential, and I think that was reflected in the final speech by the op whip, where some of the examples were clarified by her. But the rest of the speech, it didn't. Yeah, like I said, it wasn't substantiated very well. I noticed that the speaker did just bring up minorities and black churches and minority crimes and things like that with relation to the church. But I don't think the speaker did a very good job of connecting this with their opposition to the motion. However, the second speaker I found made a very good point about how the opposition isn't saying that the devil made you do it necessarily, but rather that you are giving into that sin. However, that does come dangerously close to the side government's main argument of agency, because when you give in to sin, that is you exercising your agency. So there's like a little bit of overlap there. So, and I think this was pointed out by government whip when she said that side opposition did move from the devil made me do it type argument to no, it's us giving in to temptation. So that also made me kind of rethink my ranking a little bit, but I would still say that side opposition or did better than OG, primarily because OG, I feel like with a motion like this that's so heavy with so much terminology like Abrahamic religion, sin, human agency, devil's temptations. I think they had the opportunity to really perfectly lay down the definitions and steer the debate in a particular direction. But there were no definitions. There was somewhat of a structure in the Prime Minister's speech. However, the lack of definitions, I think, proved to be very detrimental to that argument. And I think that also later on affected the debate as a whole, because I feel like because there was no set of definitions, I did notice definitions being thrown around later on in the debate. For example, the DLO defining Abrahamic religions and the sins being defined later. So that way, the Prime Minister, I think, being in that important position, having left off such a vital part of his speech was very bad for the side, I would say. So yeah.
Okay, most of it makes sense. I do disagree with comparatives. I think one thing to note here is we are 5 minutes into the deliberation already. So what we'll do is we'll only talk about comparatives rather than what they did, etc., etc. So let's just very, very precise. Otherwise, those slip. Okay. I think the reason as to why I think OG takes it above them is one, opening opposition tells me that people understand that they have, and this is something that comes in DLO. Okay. So their argumentation on why it is okay or rehabilitation is better off, etc., etc. The assumption that everybody now knows that they have fucked up and it's their problem that they have committed, which is why it's okay to put this burden upon you opting into a devil's problem. I think they go ahead and justify or give me anything as to why I should believe that everybody just agrees to the fact that they have messed up and it's their responsibility. So I think the essence of the motion in of itself, that's literally saying prop is something that already happens. There's no reason for that to continue. And then they go and talk about a metaphysical, whatever that they want to talk about. So I think they run on assumption saying people know that they are wrong. Now, for rehabilitation, this is better off. I think for that to happen, they first have to justify why people know that they are wrong, how then this happens. Because I have some material on opening government which says individual from majority community will go ahead and justify their action of oppressing minorities by saying, oh shit, I did this. Let's just repent for it and move on in life. Okay. That criminals then go ahead and understand, specifically take accountability for things that they have done and that they are things that are bad. I think this is something that DPM points out largely. Okay. But closure, I think there's zero engagement on victim closure. I think they say it's better to have a bigger heart, which is why rehabilitation is important. They keep on talking about rehabilitation. Great. I think that's a good way in which they talk about rehabilitation. Only rehabilitation and no conversation on victim closure is something that I don't get. I think victim closure is something that they are never able to solve, which is why I don't know where that argument is going. But one that I think opening opposition makes really well, and Gov bench doesn't engage with it, is the idea where minority communities will be protected in their work. So they go ahead and say minority communities are better protected because they still have an out saying, I did this because this was a temptation, and which is why I did it at the end. Great, but response to this came from DPM saying, sure, but that doesn't mean that criminals from minority communities do get to opt out just because they have done this because of the devil's temptation. But also, if I buy into this idea fully from opening opposition, what becomes problematic is I don't know why then majority community will not do it, or why then people from other communities within that religion won't do it. And if justification happens through you saying it's because of the devil, and that just gives you that much of comfort, why is that not true across the bench? And if that's true across the bench, then there is no accountability. All things that opening government is saying make sense then, because no accountability, no change, etc. So I think they pick and choose how majority feels about this, how minority feels about it. Majority thinks that they are accountable to this, which is why they'll go ahead and not take this in that way. But minority will be protected because they don't think they're accountable for this. I don't think this pick and choose can happen, which is something that largely is pointed out by opening government, which is why I think opening government takes it about that.
So I do agree with the fact that the opposition side didn't do a very good job of pointing out, or rather discussing more in depth about victim closure, which, yeah, I actually completely forgot about that and didn't take that into account. But that is, now that I think about it, a good point on the side of government. However, what you said about religion in side opposition, I think it was leader of opposition who had said that religion and the whole idea of devil's temptations does give some sort of comfort and support for minority communities, but it doesn't like offer that same support like overall. I feel like that is something that could have maybe either been clarified or just I guess, yeah, it could have been clarified had the definition of human agency been put out by PM or deputy PM at the very beginning, because human agency I personally thought that the argument of how like the devil's temptation argument would possibly be beneficial to minorities, I feel like that was a pretty strong argument on the side of, because I'm looking at human agency in the form of like human agency when taken within the context of, your circumstances. But
I agree that's a good argument. I don't think it's a bad argument. What I'm saying is, why is it only applicable on minority? Why do majority doesn't go ahead and justify ostracization through that? Saying, I did it, sorry, devil made me do it, I keep on doing it. Like, how is pick and choose happening?
Right, I get it. And I feel like that is something that has heavily to do with human agency, because on the part of like, say, minority, it would be, yeah, my circumstances. But on the side of the majority, it wouldn't necessarily be circumstances, because when you are the majority, or rather you are not in that position where you are being ostracized or you are not being disenfranchised, that same set of circumstances that might push someone in the minority community to do something like that wouldn't apply to you as much. And yours is more a sin of your